What's up, everybody? It's time to make our thumbs a little more green. On today's episode of Wisconsin Wonder Garden, we're checking out our flower garden that, as you are about to see, is holding a ton of bees right now. They absolutely love the bee balm. And then we have a milkweed variety over here, Russian sage and white sage over on this side, coral bells, some tiger lilies, and a couple of other things. But I promised you guys in our garden tour that we would show you this when it was up and blooming, so now is that time. Giving you guys a view from this side, you can see that, wait, what's that? That's a greenhouse. Stay tuned, guys, as we've got a greenhouse. It's an awesome little 6x8 that I'm so excited to start experimenting in. So stay tuned, because we're gonna have a lot of awesome videos inside that thing, and I'm just so excited for it. Really can't wait to share with you guys all the experiments that we're gonna have going on in there. But for real, the flower bed is going really well. There are bumblebees all over this thing, just crawling around, gathering up all of that beautiful pollen that they need. And let's be honest, the earth needs it as well. I strongly encourage you guys, whenever possible, plant flowers that attract bees. The most bee-friendly plants that we can get, the better they're gonna be overall for our gardens, the healthier ecosystem, and as I mentioned before, just a healthier planet overall. I've heard a lot of reports on the Facebook groups and stuff that the bee populations people are seeing, they're just struggling a little bit compared to what they normally see. So with that being said, I wanted to come back with a positive report that we are finally seeing a lot of bumblebees here in the garden. It was pretty slow up until this point, but I would say about 2 weeks ago was when we started to really see them come in. Now, there's not a ton of varieties here in the garden yet. Typically we can find maybe 5 to 10 different varieties of bees, but so far it's maybe been about 4 or 5 in total. I haven't spent a ton of time searching for the bees, but they're definitely here and increasing in numbers as the year carries on. We're getting more and more, so that's a good sign. I just want to keep you guys encouraged. The bees are definitely around. I love the way that this garden here looks with the bee balm and then the contrast with this milkweed plant. I'm sure most of you guys are aware the milkweed plants of all varieties are the lifeline plants of the monarch butterfly species. So again, this is kind of like a pollinator special with this. We've got all of the bees over there really attracted to the bee balm, and then the milkweed varieties are essential to the survival of the monarch species. Make sure you guys are doing that so we can encourage the growth of the populations of butterflies, bees, and all sorts of pollinating insects that we get around the garden. Peeking over to the other side of the garden, we have this beautiful echinacea or coneflower variety. Those are doing well so far. We've got a couple of blooms coming up every single day. My mother-in-law loves to come out here and take cuttings of all the different flowers that we have growing in the garden, and that helps encourage new flowers to bloom continuously throughout the year. And it can kind of go without mentioning, the sages that we have here are exploding in growth. Even though I've completely cut them back this last winter, up until maybe, I would say, 1.5 feet or 2 feet above the ground, and yet they've just exploded. One of the reasons why I love Russian sage so much is because it is a really prolific grower, and then it blooms for such a long time. It is also a great useful herb for all sorts of cooking applications. Just an overall a great herb to have in the garden. Really highly suggest this one as well. The black-eyed Susans, on the other hand, are a little bit slow to come up this year. As you guys can see, there's a whole bunch of them that are just barely opening up, and then many more that have not even opened up at all whatsoever. So a little bit lagging on their part, but it's no big deal. We've also got hollyhocks growing all over the place. These are some pole beans that are not doing so hot. I think they got a little bit of heat stroke over this last week, which is okay. I mean, they'll recover for sure, but it's just gotten a little bit too hot this last week for them. So they're having some trouble producing. Keep our eye on them to make sure they're as happy and healthy as possible. It's another display of some flowers that we have growing right here in the garden. Despite the extreme heat that we had last week, everything is doing fine. This garden is continually being expanded and beautified, you might say, to be as pleasing to the eyes as possible. And again, I just can't wait to keep on sharing these videos with you guys as we start growing more and more stuff and get to more detailed videos of the types and varieties of flowers that we have growing in the perennial beds. We have a ton of grapes being produced this year all across the vine. Looks like they're all right on time too to give us a gorgeous harvest, as long as we can get them before the bees get to them, and as long as we keep these little guys off of them as much as possible. These are Japanese beetles. If you guys have these in your garden, be careful. Do not squish them or squash them, because they will only attract more Japanese beetles to your garden. You just want to collect them with a plastic bag as often as possible. Just whenever you guys are out doing your daily chores in the garden, just scoop them into a plastic bag and dispose of them indoors. I would like to caution against using any sort of attractants. A lot of people make up a solution that attracts them into a bucket, of which then they drown. The problem with that is a lot of times that solution will actually attract more Japanese beetles to your garden than you would have had in the first place. We've got Sedum Autumn Joys about to bloom over there. Some irises that are about to bloom as well, but have not yet. And then circle flowers, a meadow rue columbine that has already bloomed right over here. Getting a little bit of trouble with these Cortland apples. You can see just some rust spots on there. No big deal. They will just continue producing as usual. Again, guys, plants they're never going to be in the perfect conditions for growing, and you're always going to have a little bit of discoloration here or there. It's not causing me any worry whatsoever. Wait, what's that? Yeah, you guys are seeing it. That is our brand new she shed, you might want to call it, that Jim has been working his butt off on over the last several weeks. He decided that he wanted to build his own shed instead of going out and buying a manufactured shed from some company, because he knew he was going to save some money, and he also knew that he could build a much higher quality shed for that cost than what we would have gotten buying it from somebody else. So that is going to be a future video. I want to talk to him about how he built this, why he built it that way, and what are his tricks of the trade and different techniques that he's learned throughout nearly over 35 years of construction experience. Guys, Jim is the man when it comes to that kind of stuff. So stay tuned for his take on why he built this shed this way, and how you guys can maybe do it yourself. It is not quite finished yet. We got some trim and doors to do, a couple of finishing pieces, but it is 95% done. And I will have to say that it just looks awesome, totally stunning in the backyard. Such a great addition to the space. Really adds some depth, and is going to be a great place to store all of the gardening tools and essentials that we have. last but not least, it is our vegetable garden bed that is totally full of veggies that we've been continuously harvesting throughout this year. We've gotten 2 heads of broccoli, 7 kohlrabi, about 10 cucumbers, a couple of zucchinis, and some onions from this so far since we planted it. I think the things that are struggling the most are the Brussels sprouts, which might have just been put in there too late as they're just starting to leaf and not quite get that tight cluster of a Brussels sprout that we want. But we'll see and wait to determine how it's actually going to produce. I haven't quite yet pulled the trigger on chopping those things down yet. We'll see, we'll be patient with them. And the tomatoes in here are growing crazy. I've been pruning them a little bit here and there, just taking out the suckers when I see them. Again, as I mentioned in one of my previous videos, this bed is very densely packed. Much more dense than what it should be, actually about 40% more density. I'm just kind of doing that as an experiment to see if these plants have any adverse effects from that, and see what those effects are, determine why they're happening, and again, just kind of using my creative side to examine this garden, to study it, and to see what those effects are, like if it's not getting enough oxygen in this area, not getting enough airflow, if the plants are simply overcrowding in the roots. Just kind of working on my gardening intuition with this thing as a project this year, and it's been really fun so far, and something I encourage you guys to do. Don't go out and do everything by the book, because we as gardeners have a million ways to do everything. With that being said, thank you all so much for watching. See you in the next video.